They came to expose you, to crack you open like a cheap safe, thinking they'd find skeletons and shame. They thought they'd find ammunition for their next character assassination. But what they discovered was something that made their blood run backward. The evidence of what happens when you push someone past human, past breakable, past killable, into something else entirely. You are something that doesn't die when you destroy it. You are something that feeds on the very poison they tried to inject. They arrived with their little tools, screenshots, saved messages, whispered theories about who you really are behind closed doors. They saw themselves as detectives ready to solve the mystery of your silence. But instead of finding dirt, they found a document of evolution. They found proof that some people don't break under pressure. They crystallize. They don't crumble from betrayal. They weaponize. They don't die from abandonment. They resurrect with interest. What they found when they violated your boundaries and dug into your history wasn't weakness. It was a collection of war plans and battle scars that served as a roadmap to places they'd never survive. Instead of a soft underbelly to exploit, they found armor so thick their weapons bounced off and hit them in the face. They expected a victim's story they could twist and leak, a justification for their mistreatment of you. But what they found was a survivor's manifesto, written in languages they don't teach in schools, forged in pain they've never tasted, and born from transformations they'll never achieve. Because transformation requires death first, and these people, they're too attached to their comfortable lives to ever die properly, to ever resurrect correctly, to ever become what you've become, through pure, unfiltered suffering. They should have known better. The signs were always there, in your controlled silence, in your measured responses, in the way you never quite showed all your cards. Even when they thought they had you cornered, even when they thought they had you figured out, there was always that little something behind your eyes that whispered, "Careful. This one's different. This one's been places you can't follow. This one survived things that would turn you into dust." But they ignored the warnings, because their ego told them you were conquerable, their arrogance told them you were readable, their stupidity told them you were just another puzzle to solve, another person to categorize, another soul to file away in their little mental cabinet of conquered territories. But you were never territory. You were the earthquake that destroys maps. You were the storm that rewrites geography. You were the natural disaster they mistook for nice weather. Every time they dug deeper into your business, they found another layer of complexity that made their heads hurt. Every secret they thought they uncovered turned out to be a mirror, showing them exactly what they lacked, what they feared, what they could never become, because becoming requires courage. And these people, they're cowards, dressed in confidence, costumes. They thought your privacy was hiding shame, but your privacy was containing power. They thought your party's secrets were scandals, but your secrets were strategies. They thought your silence was submission, but your silence was a countdown. And now the timer has hit 0, and they're standing in the blast radius of their own curiosity, wondering why everything tastes like regret, why everything sounds like warning bells, why everything feels like the moment before a car crash when you know it's too late to brake. In your messages, they found you negotiating with pain and making deals with suffering. In your photos, they found documentation of resurrection, visual proof of someone who walked through fire and emerged more beautiful because of the burns. In your history, they found searches for how to rebuild from nothing, and they found the blueprint of a person who learned to architect their own apocalypse and live in it like a palace. Your playlist was a soundtrack of rising, revenge, and becoming unrecognizable, a language that made comfortable people squirm. Then it hit them, that cold sweat realization, that they hadn't broken into your private life to find your weakness. They had broken into a crime scene where they were the perpetrator and you were the evidence. They hadn't discovered your secrets. They had discovered their own verdict. They hadn't found dirt. They had found their own burial ground, pre-dug and waiting with their names, already carved in stones they'll never be able to lift. The panic set in when they realized you knew. Every time they thought they were watching you, you were documenting them. Every time they thought they were gathering intelligence, you were building a case. Let them break in, didn't you? Like leaving cheese out for mice. You wanted them to find what you left for them to find, the carefully curated chaos, the strategically placed evidence of your evolution, the breadcrumbs that led not to your destruction, but to theirs. Because sometimes the best trap is an open door. Sometimes the best revenge is letting people see exactly who they tried to destroy and failed. They came looking for skeletons, and found a graveyard, but not yours. Oh no. They found the graveyard of every version of you they tried to kill and failed. What they found wasn't just personal information. It was a warning label written in experiences they'll never have, in pain they'll never survive, in transformations they'll never achieve. It said, "Handle with extreme caution. Contents under pressure may explode if disturbed, may cause severe reality distortion, may result in permanent damage to ego and self-perception." Side effects include realizing you were always the villain, insomnia from guilt, nausea from truth, and chronic regret syndrome. This warning continued. This person has been professionally destroyed and rebuilt by experts. This person has survived what was designed to be unsurvivable. This person is no longer operating under standard human limitations. This person has voided their warranty on giving a damn. This person is not responsible for what happens when you try to break them again. This person is the result of every attempt to break them failing catastrophically. You became the warning story parents tell their children about what happens when you push someone too far. You became the case study psychologists reference when discussing the dangers of underestimating human resilience. They thought they could expose you, but all they did was expose themselves to the one they created. You became the shadow in their whispers, the cautionary tale coworkers share about why some lines should never be crossed. You're the reason they double-check their locks at night, not because you're coming for them, but because they know they'd deserve it if you did. They scoured your life for leverage, searching for cracks to exploit, but all they uncovered was proof that you hold the upper hand. Your resilience towers over their malice. Your growth overshadows their stagnation. Your silence drowns out their noise. Your absence looms larger than their presence. When they pried into your world expecting weakness, they found only strength. A strength so undeniable, it didn't just shift the game, it obliterated it, and built a new one. They can't even play. Now they're stuck, aren't they? Grappling with knowledge they can't weaponize, truths they can't share without exposing themselves as the intruders, the violators, the ones who trespassed and found their own wanted posters staring back. They're trapped in a cage of their own making, haunted by revelations that burn. They thought they were the hunters, but they were always prey, studying a predator they'll never understand. They believed your secrets would give them power, but every secret they unearthed was a mirror reflecting their own flaws, their own emptiness, their own failures. They can't become what you are by dissecting you. You became what you are by surviving what tried to destroy you, while they've never faced anything tougher than their own mediocrity. The irony stings, doesn't it? In trying to expose you, they laid themselves bare. In searching for your weaknesses, they broadcast their own. In gathering ammunition, they handed you the weapon. Now they live under your gaze, knowing you see them for what they are, petty, small and incapable, compared to someone who's walked through fire and stayed to learn its lessons. You're not just living in their minds now, you're a reckoning, a warning, a 3 a.m. jolt that makes them question if you know their sins. If your silence is a strategy, if your calm is the prelude to a storm, they won't survive. They violated someone who'd already been shattered and rebuilt, stronger, with no room for their brand of cowardice. Privacy, they'll never grasp, isn't about hiding. It's about control. It's not about shame. It's about power. It's not about fear. It's about choosing who earns your truth. They prove they don't. They prove they can't handle it. They prove they're too weak to wield the knowledge they stole. You're their lesson, their consequence, their master class. In what happens when you cross someone who's already outlasted worse, you're not just living your life, you're haunting theirs. Not as a ghost, but as a mirror they can't escape, reflecting their failures every time they dare to look. They thought they'd find treasure by breaking into your world, but they stumbled into a trap. They didn't find dirt. They found their own burial plot. Every glance at you now reminds them. You know they invaded your space. You know they tried to tear you down. You know exactly who they are. That knowledge is a loaded gun, and only you know how to fire it. They're left wondering when or if you'll pull the trigger, knowing their violation of your boundaries has consequences, even if you left the door unlocked on purpose, and you documented it all, didn't you? Every move they made, every line they crossed, every desperate attempt to undermine you, you've got receipts they didn't know existed, evidence they never saw coming. While they thought they were building a case against you, you were fortifying a stronghold with their own actions. Every screenshot they took you have the metadata for. Every conversation they saved, you have the context for. They revealed their obsession, their desperation, their failure. You're not vengeful, you're thorough. You don't collect evidence for revenge, you collect it for protection. Armor against those who rewrite history to cast themselves as heroes when they've always been the villains. They wanted your diary, but found your manifesto on survival. They sought your breaking point but discovered your blueprint for invincibility. Their every attempt to shatter you only added to your legend, a story they now live in. Knowing they helped forge it, the power has shifted. The board has flipped, and the rules are yours, written in a language only those who've endured can read. They can't look at you the same way anymore. Your calm isn't weakness, it's the strength of someone who's won wars they never saw. Your peace is the authority of someone who saved themselves when everyone else was the problem. You walk differently now, not because you've changed, but because they finally see you. They understand they were never dealing with someone fragile. They were up against someone who'd been broken and rebuilt with materials that don't crack, that thrive under pressure, that feed on attempts to destroy them. Your warning label is etched into their minds. Danger, contents may shatter illusions, expose truths and rewrite realities. Side effects include existential dread, chronic insomnia, and the unshakable knowledge that karma has a face, and it's yours. They didn't invade your life. They walked into their own reckoning. They didn't find your secrets. They found their own epitaph. They didn't uncover your weaknesses. They discovered their own expiration date. Don't fade. You evolve. You don't crumble. You transform. They tried to break someone who'd already been broken and rebuilt. Someone who wears their scars like regalia, their pain like a crown no one else can lift. You're their reminder that some doors should stay closed, not for your safety, but for theirs. Because when you dig for dirt, sometimes you find graves, and sometimes those graves have their names on them, waiting to be filled. And the cruelest truth of all, they can't undo what they've seen. They can't unlearn the evidence of their own inadequacy staring back at them through the mirror of your resilience. They can't retreat to ignorance. They can't crawl back into the comfort of believing you were weak, small, and easy prey. Once you've stared into the abyss of someone who's walked through death and decided to build a castle in the ashes, you can't pretend you didn't. That image lingers like a scar across their perception, like a ghost in their peripheral vision. Every time they close their eyes they see it, the unbreakable spine, the unshakable presence, the unburnable soul. They wanted to crack you open, but all they cracked open was the coffin of their illusions. And now they're the ones trapped inside, clawing at the lid, suffocating on their own miscalculation. And here's the part that will haunt them longest. You didn't even need to punish them. You didn't need revenge, because the truth itself became the guillotine. They swung the blade thinking it would sever you, and instead it cut their own rope. drop them into their own pit. Your silence isn't empty, it's echoing in their heads, louder than any scream, heavier than any judgment. They keep waiting for the blow to fall, for the retaliation they think you've stored up. But that waiting is the punishment. That anxiety, that sleeplessness, that knowing dread that someday, somehow, the consequence will arrive. That's the sentence they wrote for themselves. You don't need to chase them. You don't need to expose them. They're living in the courtroom of their own conscience, with the jury already whispering, guilty, in the background of every thought. Because what they stumbled into wasn't a weakness, they stumbled into prophecy. Every scar you carry is a warning carved in flesh. Every silence you held was a countdown clock. They misread. Every piece of your history they tried to twist was a line of scripture in a gospel they'll never be holy enough to interpret. And now they're marked by it, branded. Branded by their own curiosity, their own violation, their own cowardice. They came seeking power, and they left cursed, because knowledge without the strength to carry it becomes a burden. And now they drag the weight of their discovery, like chains, they'll never shake off. And you walk lighter, you walk freer, you walk with the untouchable poise of someone who knows the war has already been won in silence before the battle was even announced. They will keep circling, whispering, theorizing, trying to frame the narrative, but they can never outpace what they unleashed in themselves the moment they tried to pry you open. You don't have to fight anymore. You've become the fight itself, the battlefield and the aftermath, the story and the moral. You are the lesson they'll spend the rest of their lives trying not to admit they learned. Some people aren't puzzles to solve. Some people aren't doors to break through. Some people are entire storms disguised as still air. And when you disturb them, you don't uncover secrets. You awaken disasters, and disasters don't lose. And the longer they sit with it, the more it grows, metastasizing in the quiet corners of their mind, whispering every time they think they've escaped, reminding them that they didn't just trespass into a life. They trespassed into a myth, still being written. They thought they were cracking open a person, but what they awakened was a force disguised as flesh, a storm disguised as silence, a cathedral built from broken bones that they mistook for rubble. Every memory they hold of you has now been rewritten. Every glance they took in arrogance has been transformed into evidence of their own blindness. They can't look back at your photos, your words, your stillness without hearing the echo of what they miscalculated. The drumbeat of inevitability, pounding beneath every frame, every syllable, every pause. You've become their scripture of regret, their holy text of warnings ignored, their private apocalypse written not in prophecy, but in proof. You were the earthquake they laughed at, until the ground cracked under their own feet. You were the fire alarm they silenced, until smoke filled their lungs. You were the dam they mocked, until the water swallowed their foundations. And now they carry it with them like a shadow stitched into their skin, like a curse that doesn't need spells or hexes, because it lives in the very truth they uncovered. You don't need revenge, because you've become inevitability. You don't need retaliation, because you've become gravity itself. Inescapable, undeniable, pulling them downward into their own abyss. They thought they'd find skeletons, but instead found galaxies of survival, constellations of pain turned into light, universes of rebirth that their small minds can't chart. And now they orbit you, trapped in your gravitational field, unable to break free. Because once you've seen what transformation looks like, mediocrity tastes like ash. Their punishment is eternity, in comparison. Eternity, knowing they will never touch the fire you've walked through, never drink from the rivers you've bled, never stand on the mountains you built from your own ruin. They tried to expose you, but in the end, all they exposed was the limits of their own existence, and limits are prisons. And now they're locked inside their own smallness, while you walk limitless, borderless, terrifying in your freedom, crowned in scars, armored in silence, and carrying within you the kind of power that doesn't just survive history, it rewrites it. And the truth is, they'll never admit it out loud, but you live inside their silence now. Every time they hesitate before speaking, every time they scroll a little slower, every time their chest tightens without reason, that's you echoing. Not because you haunt them like a ghost, but because you expose them like a mirror. They don't fear you because you'll hurt them. They fear you because you already prove they can't. They don't dread your revenge. They dread your existence because it reminds them of everything they aren't. Everything they'll never be. Everything they destroyed in themselves by choosing the easy path instead of the brutal one that forges resilience. You don't chase them. You don't curse them. You don't even think about them anymore. And that is the sharpest blade of all, because they know you've outgrown them, outrun them, and outlived every version of yourself they tried to bury. Now even your breath has become a sermon they can't stop hearing. You are no longer a warning, you are the aftermath. You are no longer a victim, you are the living archive of survival, carved into stone. You are no longer a person they can categorize. You are a force they can only fear, and in the end that is all they ever truly found, not your weakness, but your immortality. If this message stirred something in you, if you've ever been underestimated, violated or written off only to rise stronger, then you already understand the power of stories like this. Stay connected, stay resilient. And if this spoke to you, consider subscribing. Not because I ask, but because voices like ours deserve to rise.